In a small, isolated town nestled in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, there was a legend passed down through generations about a creature known only as the Shade. It began with a group of friends, Emma, Jack, Sarah, and Liam, who had grown up together in this quiet town. They were adventurous and often explored the surrounding woods despite the warnings from their elders. One evening, they decided to camp deep in the forest, determined to prove that the legend of the Shade was nothing more than an old wives' tale. The night was eerily quiet as they set up their camp. The dense canopy of trees blocked out most of the moonlight, casting long, twisting shadows that seemed to dance around them. They built a fire and sat around it, sharing ghost stories and laughing off the creeping unease that settled over them. As the night wore on, a thick fog rolled in, cloaking the forest in an impenetrable shroud. The temperature dropped suddenly, and the fire seemed to struggle against the cold dampness. Emma shivered and pulled her jacket tighter around her. "Did you hear that?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. They all fell silent, straining to listen. There it was again, a faint, rustling sound like something moving through the underbrush. "It's probably just an animal," Sarah said, trying to sound confident, but her voice wavered. The rustling grew louder, closer. The friends huddled together, their eyes darting around the shadowy perimeter of their camp. Suddenly the fire flickered and then extinguished, plunging them into darkness. Panic set in. Liam fumbled for his flashlight, but when he turned it on, the beam barely cut through the thick fog. They could see only a few feet in front of them. Then they saw it, a pair of glowing red eyes staring at them from the edge of the clearing. Emma's breath caught in her throat. "We need to leave. Now," she whispered. They grabbed their things and started to move quickly, trying to navigate through the dark, foggy forest. But no matter how fast they went, the rustling and the glowing eyes followed them, always just out of reach of the flashlight's beam. As they ran, they stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin. Desperate, they rushed inside, slamming the door behind them. The interior was musty and filled with decaying furniture. A single window allowed a sliver of moonlight to cut through the darkness. They huddled in the center of the room, catching their breath. "What was that?" Jack asked, his voice trembling. "No idea," Liam replied, "but we can't stay here." Suddenly the door creaked open. The fog poured in like a living entity, and with it came the Shade. It was tall and gaunt, with long, skeletal fingers and eyes that glowed like embers in the dark. Its presence sucked the warmth from the room, and the friends felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Emma screamed as the creature lunged forward, but Jack grabbed a broken piece of wood and swung it at the Shade. It passed through the creature as if it were made of smoke. The Shade let out a bone-chilling screech and reached for Sarah, who was frozen in terror. In a moment of clarity, Emma remembered the legend, how the elders spoke of the Shade being bound to the forest and repelled by fire. She grabbed a box of matches from her backpack, striking one and holding it up. The tiny flame seemed to have a miraculous effect, causing the Shade to recoil. "Light more," Emma shouted. They frantically lit matches and waved them at the creature. The Shade hissed and retreated, eventually dissolving into the fog. As the first light of dawn broke, the fog began to lift, and the friends cautiously made their way back to town. They were shaken and exhausted, but relieved to be alive. They never spoke of that night again, but they never ventured into the forest after dark. The town's legend lived on, a cautionary tale for future generations. The Shade was real, and it was always watching, waiting for those who dared to trespass into its domain.